In 2010, I moved to New York City and joined a venture capital firm called Uniscore Ventures. They are a firm that invests in early-stage tech startups. One of the most important things that I learned through that experience was seeing how the partners managed uncertainty. Investing in companies is really, really risky and really, really hard. What you are doing as a venture capitalist is you are taking large pools of money from other investors who are putting money in you so that you can put money into risky ventures that are somehow supposed to magically make money for everybody. And that's a really difficult challenge. One of the best strategies that you can have in that is to come up with what we call an investment thesis. An investment thesis is basically kind of a view of the world, and you can think about it as a filter. So as you're going through the process of meeting hundreds of companies over the course of a year, you have this filter that that you can use, and if companies map to that filter, then you spend time and you talk to them. If companies don't map to that filter, then you can kind of ignore them and move on. So all this kind of boils down eventually to, well, what is the actual investment thesis that you have? And for this firm in particular, they really believed in the internet as a transformational force that was shepherding this shift from a hierarchical, bureaucratic world to a networked one. And also that this shift was as significant as our move from hunter-gatherers to farmers, and from farmers to factories. And within that, there would be opportunities to invest and get a venture return. They had this thesis in 2004, and that led them to become the first institutional investors in companies like Twitter, Tumblr, Etsy, and Kickstarter, all of which are networks. So it worked out pretty well for them. But if you step back from that investment thesis and think about what that really means, it's actually a macro-level theory for how the world is changing as a result of the internet. And that impacts not just startups and venture capitalists, but that impacts everybody. So fast forward a year, I was still working at Uniscore Ventures, and I decided to moonlight, and I became a teacher. So this is a photograph of my class. I had a partner in creating the course, and a couple of my students are actually here in the audience. It's a class called Entrepreneurial Design, and it's taught at the Interaction Design program at the School of Visual Arts, which is a 2-year grad program, and the students take my class at the end of their first year in the program, and I've been teaching this for a couple of years. The crux of the class takes this idea of, well, if we're going through this shift from hierarchies to networks, what does that really mean for a bunch of grad students in a design program? And I think that the biggest impact that it has is on their possibilities, their future possibilities of what they go do next. So conventionally speaking, if you go to a design program, you go to work in an agency, or you become a consultant, or you work at a big company, or you go work in a startup. But in a world where you have networks like Twitter and Facebook and tools like Etsy and Kickstarter, there's these systems that enable individuals to do a whole lot more. And so there's this really interesting idea of becoming an independent creator that is made more feasible through these networks that we have around us. The hardest part about being an independent creator, though, is this aspect of self-sufficiency, right? It's the self-sufficiency that leads to independence, which leads to autonomy, which then leads to creative thought. And the biggest challenge for aspiring creators is they have some beautiful idea of something that they want to go put into the world, but they realize it's going to take 6 months of time to go make it. And then they look at their bank account and they realize they don't have 6 months of cash to go fund it. And so then they take their job, the day job, thinking that they're going to work on their thing on nights and weekends. And inevitably, they end up not being able to make their thing. And I find that incredibly sad. So I decided to focus the class around this challenge of self-sufficiency, created what I call the $1,000 project. So the students had the full semester to make $1,000 out in the real world using the internet. They could do whatever they wanted as long as it was legal. They couldn't consult because that would defeat the whole purpose. And they couldn't rent the room out because I thought that would be too easy. Immediately, it's an incredibly scary thought because most educational programs have you doing speculative work, which doesn't give you the opportunity to put you out there in the real world. So understandably, the students were pretty terrified when they started. They led to some really amazing things, and I want to show you some of the projects that they did. So one student that I had really loved cheese, and she really loved maps. So she decided to create a Kickstarter project called the Cheese Map, which literally consists of maps made out of blown-up photos of cheese. So here's another one, here's another one. And they're gorgeous, right? They're beautiful. This deserves to live in the world. So she did a Kickstarter project, and it made almost $3,000. Another set of students of mine really love poetry, and they really love this idea of creating things for the physical world, so they created a subscription service where you can get poems delivered to you for a monthly fee. It's called Postcard Poets. Another set of students really loved Instagram, and they also really love coasters, and they thought, wouldn't it be great if you could get your Instagram photos on coasters? So they created a company called Coastermatic, which literally is your Instagrams on coasters. And this project is interesting because this class, they took this class 2 years ago, and since then they've actually been making $1,000 in recurring revenue since. Another set of students really loved sticky notes and liked making prototyping tools for designers, so they did a Kickstarter project for a company called Sticky Jots and raised almost $5,000. Another one of my students was more political, and she wanted to create feminist superhero underwear where the superheroes consisted of historical female figures. So this is Frida Kahlo, Amelia Earhart, and Marie Curie reimagined as cartoon superheroes on underwear called the League of Ladies, and this raised $7,000, and it's women's superhero underwear. Another one of my students was really proficient at using the laser cutter in the department, and so basically went through and came up with this idea of making business cards that are laser cut and engraved on wood, and he grossed almost $24,000. So what are the takeaways? At a high level, the students walk in terrified, and then they end up making these amazing things, and they go through this process of realizing that they're actually far more capable than they realized before. And they understand that this is all made possible by the fact that we now live in a networked world that makes it easier to reach audiences, that makes it easier to put your ideas out there. I could care less if my students become entrepreneurs, but I care a lot about whether they are thinking entrepreneurially in whatever they choose to go do. And what I kind of realized through that process was that as a teacher, these are lessons that are valuable for everybody, not just a bunch of design graduate students. And so there should be a way to try to get this to a wider audience. However, anyone who's a teacher knows that teaching is incredibly exhausting, so the thought of having more students is incredibly mind-blowing to me, and I'd rather, I think, have a meltdown. So I've come up with another idea, which I'm calling Internet School. And Internet School is a strategy not to teach more students, but to activate and train more teachers who can then go and take these lessons to the communities that they come from and create courses and classes in whatever format they like, whether it's a formal class, whether it's an after-school group, whether it is a small discussion group amongst a bunch of friends. And the process for doing that is to take the components of the course, break them up into pieces that can be freely shared across a network of teachers and remixed and make it openly available. And then also construct a network of coaches that can work with these people to develop and design courses for themselves. I think historically, in a hierarchical world, the challenges for underserved communities has always been framed from the perspective of getting a seat at the table. And I think that there are other alternatives that are possible if you really embrace what it means to live in a networked world. And the alternative strategy that I'm proposing with something like Internet School is really to enable people to create their own tables. Thank you.